Imagine waking up each day feeling a little lost. Like there's no clear story guiding your life forward, no sense of why underneath the doings. Now picture a world where everyone's shouting extremes, where beliefs are so hardened that there's no sense of nuance, it's gone. Everyone's offended by everything. No one's grounded in a sense of reality or objectivity. And finally, I want you to imagine truth itself becoming something we don't reason toward, but we weaponize, something we curate, we distort, we toss away when it hurts too much. These aren't isolated cultural trends, as you can probably imagine. You can feel them in your gut. They're signs of a deeper unraveling, a society losing its psychological and spiritual anchor. Well, today we're diving into 3 stories that show how meaninglessness, emotional fragility, and the collapse of discernment are feeding each other, and what it might take to start stitching ourselves back together. Well, hey, this is Ed with the Voyages Cast Top 3, where we're unpacking the biggest stories shaping the future of mental health, culture, and spiritual resilience. Well, at least they're the stories I think are big. The first one I want to get into, it's called the not-so-silent epidemic, where meaninglessness is a global mental health crisis. So over the past few years, global leaders have started using stronger language when it comes to mental health. It's no longer just about managing symptoms or expanding access to medication. The World Health Organization and the Global Mental Health Action Network are both pushing for a broader shift, one that recognizes mental health not just as a clinical issue, but as a human one, an existential one, a social and environmental one. Now, take the WHO's Mental Health Action Plan, which runs through 2023. It lays out 4 big issues we really can't ignore. First, mental health funding is drastically low. Less than 2% of global health budgets go to mental health, even though it accounts for over 13% of the, quote, disease burden worldwide. Now, second, most systems are still stuck in a reactive institutional model rather than investing in a community-based or preventative approach to mental health. The third thing, we're failing young people. Suicide and depression are on the rise. And yet, youth mental health is constantly under-resourced. At least that's what they're finding. And finally, we're ignoring the social roots. Poverty, isolation, instability, these aren't side issues. They might be central to what's really going on. But I suspect there might be even more. And this is where it matters. If you've spent any time in therapy or just paid attention to your own soul, you know this. People don't fall apart just because of bad brain chemistry or even situations in their life. They break down when life stops making sense. Viktor Frankl put it plainly in Man's Search for Meaning. People need purpose more than they need comfort. And when purpose disappears, we don't just get sad. We get disoriented. We start looking for substitutes. We start numbing ourselves. We start escaping through the noises of the world. And research backs this up. In 2016, a study in the Journal of Positive Psychology found that a lack of purpose strongly correlates with depression, anxiety, and suicidality. On the flip side of this, though, meaning-centered therapies like logotherapy or narrative therapy consistently help people build resilience in the face of trauma, grief, and long-term illness. So when people lose meaning, it's not just a spiritual loss, it's a public health emergency. And in a world that's growing more and more isolated and disoriented every day, the emergency isn't silent anymore, it's screaming. And this is where we get into story 2, which is we'll spend a little bit more time on because it's kind of a bigger deal. Mass violence, fragile minds, and the rise of radicalization. In the span of just a few weeks, we've witnessed 3 brutal acts of violence. The assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk in Utah on September 10th, a school shooting at Evergreen High School in Colorado on the same day, and a fatal stabbing of a Ukrainian refugee, Iryna Zarutska, on a Charlotte light rail train in late August. Now, these are 3 different states, 3 different stories, but there is an underlying crisis that I think we can all connect with, and that's something that I'd like to talk to you guys about. People becoming fractured, untethered, so much so that they lash out, not just at individuals, but at meaning itself. So let's walk through each of these stories. Kirk was speaking at Utah Valley University when he was shot and killed by a 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. Robinson turned himself in days later with a little help. Prosecutors are calling it a political assassination, which it is. But what's eerie is what came before. A Discord server where Robinson had been posting violent rhetoric and memes, confessing his plans in real time. His bullets were engraved with all kinds of nonsense that I do not want to get into. And after the attack, he bragged about having written a manifesto. At Evergreen High School, the same day, a 16-year-old Desmond Holly opened fire at his high school. 2 classmates were injured. He died by suicide on the scene. And authorities say he'd been radicalized online. His social accounts were full of anti-Semitic posts, white supremacist symbols, Columbine references, and he wore a shirt that said, quote, "Wrath," imitating one of the Columbine shooters. Hours before the attack, he even posted a photo of his revolver. Iryna Zarutska's stabbing just weeks earlier, the 23-year-old Zarutska, who had fled the war in Ukraine for safety in the United States, was stabbed to death on a light rail train in Charlotte. Her attacker, DeCarlos Brown Jr., had a long history of untreated mental illness and prior convictions. There was no clear ideological motive here, which is, I think, fairly obvious, but just a raw, disconnected act of violence. These stories are terrifying, but they're not really random. They're what happens when the human mind loses its ability to see others as human. When emotional pain goes untreated, and an online echo chamber feeds resentment like it's oxygen. Now, let's be clear. Not all radicalized people are mentally ill, and not all mentally ill people are violent and radicalized. But there are dangerous overlaps when untreated mental health, social isolation, and ideological extremism starts to kind of braid together. A 2024 review in Frontiers in Psychiatry found that while mental illness alone isn't a main driver of radicalization, it can heighten vulnerability in those who are already emotionally adrift. But what are the common threads? There's a few I want to discuss. One is an identity void. There's a deep hunger to belong, to feel seen. For some, that gets hijacked by online tribes that offer purpose. Another one is an online echo chamber. Places like Discord, Reddit, TikTok, these algorithms seem to reward outrage. I'm not sure how that works. Emotional fragility is another one. Not psychosis, but the inability to metabolize pain, fear, contradiction, so the person doesn't just disagree with others, they dehumanize them. Extremist ideology is what some researchers call complex contagion. It's kind of like this. The more your network reinforces a message like you're right to hate them or your pain is someone else's fault, the more likely you are to act on something. None of these people were born monsters, but they were certainly shaped by a system, a family, a whatever that failed to provide meaning, connection, and care. And that could simply be an online system. That could be a community of people who prey on weak-minded others. Kirk's killer spiraled in a rage-fueled echo chamber. Holly mimicked school shooters to claim identity through infamy. Brown, left to cycle through a broken mental health system, exploded without warning. This isn't just about ideology. It's about the collapse of human dignity, our own, and the dignity of those in our lives, of the others that we see and meet throughout the day. And that brings me into story 3. Spend 5 minutes on any social media platform and you'll feel it. Truth doesn't really float to the top anymore, does it? It gets filtered out, it gets weaponized, and turned into content. After the Kirk shooting, graphic videos went viral within hours, minutes. People were calling for vengeance. Zarutska's stabbing footage made the rounds too. And Holly's disturbing pre-attack posts stayed online long enough to potentially inspire others. Here's the thing though. Our brains are wired to respond to emotional intensity. When we feel angry or overwhelmed, our thinking narrows. It's called a tunnel effect. Social media exploits that vulnerability. Algorithms exploit that vulnerability by prioritizing what provokes. They don't reward truth, they reward engagement. And that usually means outrage, fear, and division. Social identity theory also helps explain what's going on. When our beliefs are tied to group belonging, disagreement doesn't feel intellectual, it feels personal, like actual betrayal. And that kills our curiosity to understand. That limits our ability to discern. And discernment is the ability to hold complexity, questioning our assumptions, to seek truth. And this art is being lost. This art of discernment is becoming something of the past. And yet it's not beyond us, though. This skill of discernment is a skill we can learn. It's something we can practice daily through mindfulness, through critical thinking, through exposing ourselves to voices that challenge us without confirming our worst instincts. But the window is closing. And what's the cost of losing this skill? Well, it's everything from broken relationships to literal violence. These three stories, Kirk's assassination, Holly's rampage, Zarutska's murder, aren't just disturbing headlines. They're like a litmus test of the despair, the derangement, of the just total dysfunction of our society and distress. So here's what we need to do. Just as an option, as a tip, as some guidance for you today to move the needle, ask yourself always, where am I getting a sense of meaning? And is this a foundational place? Is this a sturdy place for getting meaning? Or is it built on clicks and approval? How have I been responding to the differences I see in the world? Do I get curious about those differences, or do I get defensive as if it's violence or hateful? Do I listen, or do I retreat? And when you're online, are you becoming more grounded or more reactive? Asking these questions of yourself daily, weekly, whatever, will start transforming you. Because the truth is, meaning making, emotional resilience, and discernment are not genetic, they're cultivated. They're choices. And they're choices we need to start making intentionally. Well, that's all I have for you today. And if this hit you hard or just stirred something in you, share it with somebody. Talk about it. Call a friend. Let it become a doorway to something more, something deeper. And if you think we've earned it, hit that subscribe button and drop us 5-star review, because as much as I hate to say it, the algorithms, as we've talked about today, they need a little encouragement to share this kind of message. Maybe this is a better message than the one getting spread on the internet. Maybe this is the kind of message people need to know about. And if you think so, please share it. And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for joining me today.